you don't want any loose clothing. If you get loose clothing, it gets caught in here, it's going to pull the tool towards you. So always make sure that you're dressed neat, shirt tucked in, no loose jewelry in the wire. Okay, so that's about it as far as the safety inspection. You do want to check your blade and make sure it doesn't look burnt up or really dull, because that's a hazard if you got a dull blade, because the next thing you know, you're trying to force your saw through the material, and that's never good. It can create binding and kickback. So let's go through the components of the saw. This is called the base. If you read this owner's manual, they call it the shoe. Other people might refer to it as the shoe. We, in the class here and in the shop, we refer to it as the base, but I just want you to know there are other names for things out there, so if you ever hear it, you know what they're talking about. This nut that holds the saw in, the blade in, is called the arbor. And to adjust your bevel, you have a bevel lock here, so you would loosen that up. And this one actually clicks into place, and it has a gauge on it for the most common bevels that you would be using. So you would put that in place and then lock it securely in, and always make your adjustments with it plugged down, or not plugged in. To adjust the depth, you have a lock lever here. You will loosen that up and adjust your depth. And when you adjust your depth, you don't want more than 1/4 inch of the teeth exposed beneath the blade, beneath the material that you're cutting. So if you're cutting 1/2 inch material, how deep would you set this the base to?
3/4.
3/4, no more than 3/4. So that'd be 1/4 more than the material that you're cutting. Preferably an 1/8 inch, but no more than 1/4. Obviously, you know where the trigger is. And then this little button right here is your blade lock. You would depress that when you're changing the blade, and then spin your blade until it comes to a stop. This will depress in and the blade will come to a stop. That locks the blade for you to change, for you to loosen the arbor up to change the blade. Otherwise, it would just keep on spinning. Now, most cuts that you're going to make are going to be rib cuts here in the class, or cross cuts. Your plywood is 4 foot in this direction. It's 8 foot in this direction. The grain of your plywood runs the long length of the plywood. So a rib cut is cutting with the grain. A cross cut is cutting across the grain. That should be easy to remember, since the word cross is in across the grain. So a cross cut is across the grain. Any questions? All right, now when we're cutting our material, we want to make sure our material is well supported. So if you have your sawhorses like this, you have your material going across, you're going to cut this. This is cantilevered material, so this is going to drop on you. So if you've got a long piece and you want to cut it, you need to spread these out a little bit, or add another support here. It is like the worst piece of chalk. It has just been crumbling in my fingers the whole time I've been using it. You either want to add another piece of material here to support it. If you have a helper, they can stand here and they can hang on to the edge for you before it drops off. But you don't want to have that just cantilevered. It needs to be supported. We want you to use clamps and clamp your material to your sawhorses. Properly secure it, and never cut in between 2 supports. Don't reach Don't overreach while you're cutting. Make sure your cord stays behind you when you're cutting and stay to the side of the saw. So you do not want the saw directly in front of you when you're making your cut. If there happens to be a kickback, what's going to happen is it's going to throw the saw back at you and expose you to a hazard. So when you're cutting, you want to have both hands on the saw. You want to be to the saw, the side of the saw when you're moving. If you have to overreach, get to what's comfortable, and then you can walk around your material, come to the side, pick up where you left off. You can cut from either side. You just want to make sure that your base is firm and secure on top of the material that you're cutting. You do not want to cut a piece of material like this with this little bit of base holding onto the material. You want the larger, broader side of the base on the material. And we're going to put this back. So when you put the saw back, you want to make sure that your base isn't out like this because your case isn't going to close. So make sure the base is all the way up. Put it back into the case properly and take a moment to wrap the cord up right. Don't just throw it in there. A lot of times you'll find damage to cords just because people are in a hurry and they throw the saw back in the case and just shove the cord in there, and then it ends up getting pinched in the case when it gets closed. Saws aren't cheap, and we don't want to replace a cord every other day because somebody just didn't take a moment to wrap it up properly and put it in the case rack. Okay. Now let's just review a little bit. Oh, also I forgot to add, when you do start to cut, you want to engage the trigger and let the speed get up to speed before you go into the wood with it. You don't want to start with the blade touching the wood, and you don't want to just trigger it on and go right on into your cut. Give it a second for the blade to come up to speed before cutting. Okay. All right. Quick review. How do we know if the cord is a double insulated cord?
Because the double squares.
Square within the square on the label, and you can also get a key that a tip that it might be by the blades on the plug being one wider than the other.
Polarized blade.
But yeah, but to know for sure, you're absolutely right. It's the symbol of the square inside the label. How far should the teeth be exposed beneath your material that you're cutting? So beyond the thickness of the material. How far beyond the thickness of the material?
A quarter underneath the
No
material.
more than a quarter of an inch. Great. Good answer. Good answer. And why do we not cut between two supports?
You could collapse in.
Well, it could collapse in. Good. You help him out a little bit. What else do we have?
What about cantilever?
The cantilever can cause problems as
Yeah.
well, but that's with the material hanging off the end of the support. But between two supports, what's going to happen is it's going to cause the material to bind
Right.
and result in a
Kickback.
kickback. Very good. Very good.
Good job, bro.
What is the function of the blade arbor?
What do you mean by blade arbor?
The blade arbor, we'll go back, it's the nut that actually holds the blade onto the saw.
Oh, it keeps it tight.
Yeah, keeps the blade onto the saw. And one last question, what PPE is needed when operating the circular saw?
Safety glasses, gloves, hard hat, boots, of course, and hearing protection.
And hearing protection, very good. All right, now I'm gonna hand out a written review, written test review. We'll go on through that and see what you've retained from the class, and we'll go from there. All right, thank you.